Greetings and salutations, students of elementary Greek. In lesson 1, I want to turn our attention to the alphabet, since we're going to spend our time right now. So the Greek alphabet has 24 letters, uppercase and lowercase letters. Most of the time you're going to encounter these as lowercase letters, but when you read the Greek New Testament, all of the titles for the books are going to be in capital letters, so it's worth being aware of what the capital letters are. So for the Greek alphabet, the first is the famous alpha. I'm going to demonstrate how to write these lowercase letters. I'm not going to demonstrate the uppercase letters. So in the case of the alpha, you're going to start at the top here, come down, and like that. So you're going to start at the top, come down on a loop. That's your alpha. Beta, it's like our B. It's got this little extra line here at the bottom that comes from below the line. So you have this beta, that's your B sound, b, b, b. Gamma, it's almost like a Y in terms of how you write it. Gamma, gamma. Delta, the D sound, delta. You're going to do a circle and then do a hook at the top. Circle, hook at the top. That's your delta. Epsilon, think of it almost like a backwards 3. Epsilon. Then you have your zeta. This is one of the more difficult letters because it's so different than anything that we have. But you're going to think of it as having a little hat, come on down, and then a swoop at the bottom. Little hat, come on down, swoop at the bottom. Hat, come on down, swoop at the bottom. That is the zeta. Eta looks a little bit like our N with some extra, but this is a long E sound. Eta, eta, long E. So it's similar to the epsilon in it's that E sound, but while the epsilon is a short E, the eta is a long E. So you're going to want to give it that extra length here. Coming down, the eta. Theta. You're going to want to do a circle with a line horizontal. Theta. Theta. That TH sound. Iota is like our I. You're going to be tempted to want to dot this. Don't. The iota does not take a dot. So you're going to, just like our lowercase I. Kappa looks a lot like our K. That's not a very good kappa there, but in a similar sound, kappa. Lambda. Lambda. Mu, like our M. You're going to come down, give it a little extra at the bottom here, and then come up to the top. Mu. Nu. This looks like a V. If you're not paying attention, you're going to confuse this for a V. It's a nu. It's a nu. It's got that pointed bottom here. So it's a nu. Nu. So when you're reading this, don't pronounce it v. It's n. Nu. Xi. This is probably the hardest letter to draw. It's kind of a combination of the zeta and the epsilon. So you have the top hat, then you do your 3, and then you give it a little tail at the bottom. Top hat, 3, tail. Top hat, backwards 3, tail. So that's your xi. That's that, like in the chaos of bricks. X. That's the xi. Omicron is your short O sound. It just looks like RO, just a short O sound. Omicron. P. Think of it as like a roof with 2 pillars, right? P. P. Rho, there's going to be a smooth R here. Rho is smooth on this corner. Rho. Rho. That's the R sound. Sigma is interesting because there's a sigma in the middle of a letter, or when the letter sigma is in the middle of a word versus the sigma when it's the final, like a mem in Hebrew. But the idea is that in the middle of a letter, so if we're looking at, at the end of a letter, logos, word, it's going to be that sigma final. But if we're thinking of sozo, I save, this sigma, if it's at the very first letter, or Any other time you see the sigma showing up where it's not the last letter in a sentence, it's going to be that sigma final is the last letter. Not a very good sigma final. It's going to be that last letter, or it's going to be the regular sigma. So that's your sigma, 2 separate letters for the sigma and the sigma final. It may seem confusing, but I promise it's a very easy letter to get. You'll pick up on it very easily. Tau, like our lowercase, it's like if you made the T like a T, except you didn't have a top part, right? So it's like a small T. It's kind of a small caps T, tau. Upsilon, this is your U sound, upsilon. And notice the difference between the nu, which has the pointed, that's the N sound, the nu, versus the upsilon, which is that rounded upsilon sound, okay, that U sound. Phi, this is the like in phone, the PH, phi, just do it like this. You don't have to go up, back up to the top. You can just come down. Phi, so that's that PH sound, Chi, so if you have Xmas or Christos, which is another, here you have a good example of the Christos has the sigma in it and the sigma final here. So that chi sound, he, psi, it's like an upsilon with a line through it. Psi, and it's that PS like in lips. The omega is your last letter, the 24th letter, and it's just like a very round W shape, omega. And this is the long O. So whereas you have the omicron up here, the omicron is the short O, ah sound, and the omega is the long O sound. So it's easy to sometimes not have difficulty distinguishing these, but those are the various sounds. So couple of pronunciation notes. The gamma is a hard G as in gift. The Kc is a KS as in bricks or example. The key is Scottish lock or Christos. The Pc as lips, the PS sound that you have there. Gamma nasal. This is important because you'll come across this occasionally. When you have the gamma doubled, it becomes an NG sound in English. So famously the word angelos, where we get angel from, the gamma becomes NG, angelos. Similarly, when you have the gamma combined with a kappa, a kasi, or a key, that kind of K sound in it, it becomes an NG sound, like larynx, a splunk nisthe, pros enankai. These gamma with the kappa, gamma with the key, gamma with the kasi takes this sort of N sound. So like in ring or angelos. And again, the final sigma, we've already talked about this, so we can look at that. Vowels. 7 vowels in Greek. The short vowels, notably, some vowels can be long and short, right? Alpha can be long, it can be short. Iota can be long or short, and upsilon can be long or short. The short E sound is epsilon, the long E sound is eta, the short O sound is omicron, the long O sound is omega. So you can see that list. Gone through these, which ones are short, which ones are long. You'll have a PDF of this handout so you can review this as you go. It's important for you to know about diphthongs. By definition, diphthongs are a combination of 2 vowel sounds into one long syllable. This is really crucial for pronunciation to be able to recognize these examples of a diphthong where you have 2 vowel sounds combining into one long sound. So I'm going to read through these and give you the pronunciation as well as an example word in Greek and the definition of that word. So the Greek alpha iota, like I and isle, or ion, which means age or time. Epsilon iota, the like in or the a is in like neighbor or eidolon, which means idle. Eidolon. Omicron iota. Oi, like an oil, or koinonia, the word for fellowship or community. Upsilon iota, like in we as in sweet, or in this case, huios, which is the word for sun. Now you're hearing an H sound in there, which is this rough breathing mark. I haven't talked about that, but that weos is like sweet, upsilon iota. Alpha upsilon, like in cow, autos means it, or auta, excuse me. Oo, like in food or soup. So not ow like in cow, but oo like in food or soup. Uranos, which means sky or heaven. Epsilon, upsilon, feud. Eulagatos, which means blessed. Eulagatos. Euriscon, which is our word for find, he found. The eta upsilon takes that u, just like in feud. Eta upsilon and the epsilon upsilon have that very similar sound. Technically, when you have the alpha iota in some instances, like we see, it can be an improper diphthong where this is called a iota subscript, and that means that it's there, but you don't pronounce it any differently. So alpha iota isn't I, it's just ah. Okay. I don't spend a lot. I do want to spend some time with accents, but not a lot of time. I'm not going to grade you based on your ability to recognize accents, they're correct or incorrect, but I do want you to know about them. There are three kinds of accents: the acute accent, the circumflex accent, and the grave accent. The acute accent means the pitch goes up in your pronunciation, so lagos, lagos. The circumflex accent is kind of a combination. It's the acute and the grave, right? So you go up and you come down. So the circumflex, you're kind of riding that up and down. So it's the longest of the accents. Pitch up, then down. So arche, arche. So you're going up and then coming down. The grave accent is just that pitch down, kai, kai. And so you're kind of bringing that down. Really important for you to recognize breathing marks. Anytime a word begins with a vowel, it's going to have a rough or a smooth breathing mark. In the case of the rough breathing mark, like in huios, you're going to get that H sound, huios. And when you have the smooth breathing mark, like in apostolos, you're going to get the, you're not going to have a sound. There's no sound at all. So the rough breathing mark makes an H sound. Huios is where you see it most commonly. You're mostly going to see the smooth breathing mark. It's going to be way more common, but you do want to pay attention to when you see the rough breathing mark. Sometimes, not always, not a lot, but sometimes there are some words where if it has a smooth breathing mark, it means one thing, and a rough breathing mark, it means another thing. So for example, in the word hen means one, like as in the number one, and n is a preposition that means in. So there are occasions, it doesn't happen a lot, where a word having a rough or smooth breathing mark tells you it's one word or another. In terms of punctuation, there are four punctuation marks you need to learn: the minor pause, the English comma equivalent, the Greek comma, to the English comma, the major pause, the period, or this is actually not a period, but it's like a dot in the middle at the end of a sentence. It's not at the bottom, it's kind of in the middle of the line of writing. So if you think of your composition notebook and you've got the sort of dot, dot, dot line in the middle, this mark, the major pause, is in the middle of that. The full stop is the period, right? The English period, or the Greek period, is equivalent to the English period. The most difficult one that people tend to have trouble with is the question mark. The semicolon in Greek, the Greek semicolon, is the equivalent of the English question mark. So obviously the question mark is one of the most important punctuation marks because it reframes the question. It reframes a sentence as a question rather than a statement. And so it's really important to pay attention to those question marks. It's easy to miss them. The other ones, the comma, the semicolon, and the period are not that difficult to remember. So just make sure you're paying attention to those for punctuation. I give you a bit here on general accent rules. I'm going to go over this, but I'm not going to be testing you on accentuation, but it is helpful. Only the last 3 syllables of a word can be accented. So on a 4-syllable word, apostolos, apostolos. So our first syllable is the a, second syllable is the pa, third syllable is the sta, fourth syllable is the los. Only these last 3 syllables can be accented. The second to last syllable is the antepenult. The third to last syllable is the antepenult, and this can only take an acute accent. So if this syllable is accented, it must have the acute. The penult can take either. So this accent number 3 here can take either the acute accent or the circumflex. The second or the antepenult, the third to last syllable, can only take the acute. And the ultima, the very last accent, can take the acute, the circumflex, or the grave. It can take all 3 different accents. Other things to know, the circumflex can only be on a long vowel. You're never going to see a circumflex on an omicron. It will have to be on a long vowel. And whenever you have a long ultima, that is the last syllable here is long. The antepenult, so this if this is long, your last syllable, you can't have an accent on the antepenult. And the penult, if accented, must be acute. So in the case of anthropos, we're going to see why this matters in a little bit. In the morphology of anthropos, it becomes anthropou. When that happens and you have the short vowel here becomes a long diphthong, oo, then the accent migrates from the antepenult to the penult. So again, I'm not going to be testing you on this. So if you're kind of going, Tyler, I don't know if I can follow this. This seems weird. These rules are helpful, but I'm not going to be testing you on whether or not you understand all the accents. The short ultima, so when the final vowel is short, the antepenult can be accented, but it can only be an acute accent. And a long penult, if accented, must be circumflex. So you have a short ultima, a long penult. If it's accented, it's going to have a circumflex. There's obviously more detailed rules that go into accentuation in Greek, and there are whole books that have been written on accents. They are actually quite helpful and important in reading Greek, but for the sake of our time, again, I want you to be aware of them, and I'm going to try and pay attention to them in lecture material so you're aware of what's going on. But if you're thinking about prioritizing your time this week, what do you really need to learn? You really need to make sure you have a sense of what the letters are and the sounds of the letters, particularly the diphthong sounds. So think about each letter, memorize the 24-letter alphabet that we've gone over, what vowel sounds they make, and then you're going to practice that this week in your work as you read aloud a passage from Genesis and a passage from John. So the Greek translation of Genesis, you're going to read the text and you're just going to work on pronunciation, thinking about paying attention to the vowels, to the sounds, to even the accents. My hope for you is that as you practice that, read through it at least 2, maybe 3 times, and really try to make it flow. It's going to really help your reading if you can pronounce the words without kind of thinking every single time you come to a letter, okay, how do I pronounce this? How do I pronounce the nu? How do I pronounce the zeta? All of those things. If you can begin to recognize the sounds of each letter and the sounds of each vowel and diphthong, it's really going to help as we next week get into learning about actual words and translating sentences. So as you're thinking about your homework and the exercise assignment for this week, do that work of reading aloud the text that I've provided for you. So that's all we have for this week. It's going to ramp up soon, but what you need to do now is really focus on learning that alphabet.